Imagine waking up in a world where time has moved backward. Not to the 90s, but to an era when electricity existed, but intelligence was absent. You reach for your smartphone, but it is nothing more than a lifeless piece of glass and metal. You turn the car's ignition, but the central computer won't even allow the spark plugs to fire. You head to the hospital, but the MRI and CT scans are dark. This is not a fictional nightmare. This is the exact description of a world where the flow of components, no larger than a fingernail, originating from a small island in East Asia, has been cut off. We are talking about semiconductors, components that, according to the 2024 World Trade Organization report, have become the most vital traded commodity in human history, surpassing even oil. Chips are the backbone of all our digital tools, from smartphones to advanced vehicles. We live in a world that breathes with the electrical pulses of these microscopic components. Yet, few realize that the production of these incredibly complex pieces is primarily held by a single entity, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSMC. But why is all this power concentrated in one single point? To understand this, we must go back to a time when Taiwan was nothing more than a poor, agricultural island. The history of TSMC is inextricably linked to the life of a gifted individual with a strategic vision, Dr. Morris Chang. Morris was born in 1931 in Ningbo, China. His childhood was marked by the displacement caused by World War II and the Chinese Civil War. He fled to Hong Kong and eventually, at the age of 18, set out for the United States in pursuit of the American dream. Morris was a prodigy in mathematics and physics. He attended Harvard University, then studied mechanical engineering at MIT, and finally earned his PhD in electrical engineering from Stanford University. His education at Stanford placed him exactly at the epicenter of the birth of the Silicon Revolution. After his studies, he joined Texas Instruments. Morris spent 25 years of his life at this company, rising to the position of senior vice president in charge of the entire semiconductor division of this American giant. At that time, the prevailing global model was that every company had to design its own chips and own its own factory. But Morris Chang saw something others did not. He realized that the cost of building factories was rising at a terrifying rate. At the time, any company that wanted to manufacture chips was forced to have its own multi-billion-dollar factory. Morris Chang told his executives, "This model is wrong. The cost of building factories is becoming so high that small companies will be destroyed. We must build a factory that produces exclusively for others." Their response: laughter and indifference. They thought no chip designer would be foolish enough to entrust their design secrets to an outside factory. Feeling that his vision found no buyers at the age of 54, a time when most people are thinking about retirement, Morris resigned and left America. In 1985, the Taiwanese government was searching for a path toward industrialization. At the time, Taiwan lacked the capability to produce even advanced nuts and bolts, let alone microscopic chips. The government invited Morris to return to the island. With government financial backing, in 1987, Chang founded a company that would shake the world. His model was the pure-play foundry. This model was a revolutionary new idea. Previously, chip-making companies handled both design and manufacturing in-house. But TSMC, as a pure-play foundry, focused solely on manufacturing chips for other companies and never sold products under its own brand name. He promised the world, "We will never design chips. We will not be your competitor. We will only be your most loyal manufacturer." In the early years, the challenges were monumental. Tech giants were hesitant to outsource their production to an unknown entity. However, one of the first major clients was Altera. This deal granted TSMC the credibility it needed. Suddenly, companies like Nvidia and Qualcomm, who possessed the intellect and designs but lacked the capital to build a factory, realized they could compete with giants like Intel by relying on Morris Chang. According to analysis by The Economist, this model caused manufacturing power to gradually shift away from America and concentrate in Taiwan. TSMC began to learn. Every day, every hour, and every second, they focused on one thing: learning how to build better. They became such masters of their craft that giants like Intel, who once laughed at Morris Chang, suddenly looked back only to find Taiwan miles ahead of them. Today, when we talk about a TSMC factory, we aren't talking about a simple warehouse. We are talking about gigafabs. These are structures that, according to official statistics, are valued at over $20 billion each. To help you understand the magnitude of this figure, you should know that with the cost of building a single chip factory in Taiwan, you could rebuild 20 Burj Khalifas, the tallest building in the world, from scratch. But what happens inside these walls? Why is it that no one, even with trillions of dollars in budget, can replicate what Morris Chang has built? The answer lies in a secret machine that comes from the Netherlands, housed in rooms that are the cleanest spots in the entire solar system. In the next segment, we enter the heart of these machines, where physics ends and impossible engineering begins. In the quiet suburbs of Veldhoven, Netherlands, lies a company named ASML that holds the modern world's greatest secret. It is the sole manufacturer of EUV lithography machines, devices without which today's artificial intelligence, smartphones, and supercomputers would not exist. Each machine costs more than $200 million, yet its strategic value transcends any monetary figure, as these machines are humanity's only gateway to the atomic scale. The primary challenge engineers faced was the wavelength of light. Conventional methods utilized deep ultraviolet, or DUV light, which had a wavelength of approximately 193 nanometers. However, for printing circuits at scales of 7 nanometers and smaller, using this light was like trying to paint a miniature with a large brush. Humanity needed a finer pen, and that pen was EUV light with a wavelength of 13.5 nanometers. EUV light, or extreme ultraviolet, is the most stubborn light that physicists have ever worked with. This light does not exist in nature on Earth because it is absorbed by almost everything, even air. For this reason, the entire interior of the machine must be placed in a perfect vacuum. Engineers had to evacuate a space larger than a bus of any air molecules, so that the precious photons could reach the surface of the silicon wafer. The production of this light is itself a physical miracle. At the heart of the machine, a generator shoots droplets of molten tin at a speed of 250 miles per hour. These droplets are so small that they are invisible to the naked eye. Then, a high-powered carbon dioxide laser targets this droplet in mid-air to turn it into a plasma state, made by the German company Trumpf. This collision happens not once, but twice. The first laser pulse hits the droplet to flatten it into a pancake shape and increase its cross-sectional area. A millisecond later, the second pulse hits this tin disc with a crushing force. This creates a plasma explosion that reaches a temperature of 400,000 degrees Celsius, 40 times hotter than the surface of the sun. This plasma is what emits the EUV light we need. For this light to remain stable, this process must be repeated 50,000 times per second. Imagine trying to shoot a microscopic moving target 50,000 times per second and hitting the exact center every time. Any misalignment in the laser's timing, even by a billionth of a second, would cause the entire process to collapse and the light to go out. But producing the light is only half the way. Guiding it was a bigger challenge. Since EUV light is absorbed by glass, traditional lenses were useless. Engineers needed mirrors that would reflect the light. But not ordinary mirrors, rather, mirrors made by the German company Zeiss with atomic precision. These mirrors are the most polished objects that human civilization has ever created. If these mirrors were enlarged to the size of Germany, the tallest bump or defect on the surface would be less than a millimeter high. This level of smoothness is so that the EUV photons are reflected without the slightest scattering. Each mirror is composed of hundreds of nanometer layers of molybdenum and silicon, which must be stacked on top of each other with the precision of an atom's thickness for a phenomenon called Bragg reflection to occur. Even with this stunning precision, these mirrors only reflect about 70% of the light, and the rest is absorbed by the mirror itself and converted into heat. Managing this heat in a vacuum environment, where there is no air for cooling, is an engineering nightmare. Zeiss and ASML had to install microscopic cooling systems behind the mirrors to prevent them from deforming due to the heat. Vibration is another great enemy. At the nanometer scale, even the vibration from a person walking kilometers away or sound waves can destroy the printing accuracy. The entire EUV machine rests on magnetic suspension systems that actively counteract any environmental vibrations. This machine is practically floating in space to have the necessary stability for printing the circuits. Inside this machine, there is a part called a mask, on which the circuit map is engraved. This mask acts like a photographic negative. The EUV light, after reflecting from the mirrors, hits this mask and carries the intricate pattern of billions of transistors with it to shine on the surface of the silicon wafer, which is coated with sensitive chemicals. These chemicals, known as photoresist, have a story of their own. These materials are mainly produced in Japan and must be so sensitive that they react to every single EUV photon. If the chemical composition of these materials has even a 1% error, the circuits will not form correctly, and the entire wafer, which is worth thousands of dollars, is turned into waste. When the machine is ready in the Netherlands, the challenge of moving it begins. An EUV machine consists of 100,000 separate parts and kilometers of cabling. To transport it to the TSMC factory in Taiwan, 3 Boeing 747 airplanes are needed. Each part is placed in special containers whose temperature, humidity, and pressure are monitored in real time by satellite. In Taiwan, these parts are assembled in a building called a fab, short for fabrication plant. The cost of building a modern fab is about $20 billion, a figure that exceeds the military budget of many countries. These buildings are not just factories, but temples of technology built on massive anti-earthquake foundations to withstand the constant tremors of the island of Taiwan. The clean rooms inside these factories are the cleanest places in the solar system. In every cubic foot of air in a typical room, there are millions of dust particles. In TSMC's clean rooms, this number drops to less than 1 particle. Engineers enter in suits known as spacesuits, and even their breath is filtered, because for a 3-nanometer transistor, a single dead human skin cell is like a huge mountain. The work culture at TSMC is fundamentally different from Silicon Valley. Here, the talk is of military discipline. Engineers work in 12-hour shifts and have a system called round-the-clock research and development. This means that when one team is resting, the next team continues the work from the exact same point, so that not even a second is wasted on the path to the next generation of chips. This discipline is particularly crucial in the yield section. In the semiconductor industry, yield refers to what percentage of chips on a wafer are functional. Achieving a yield of over 80 or 90% at the 3-nanometer scale is something akin to a miracle, at which TSMC is a master. Every 1% increase in yield translates to hundreds of millions of dollars more in net profit. One of the reasons for TSMC's success is its close relationship with customers like Apple and Nvidia. They work together on the design of a chip years before it is manufactured. This collaboration ensures that TSMC knows exactly what to build and the customer is assured that production capacity is reserved for them. This is a closed and very powerful ecosystem. But the dependence of these machines on energy is terrifying. Each EUV machine consumes about 1 megawatt of electricity, which is 10 times that of previous generations. A complete factory with several machines needs as much electricity as a small city. Taiwan has been forced to put its energy infrastructure entirely at the service of TSMC to prevent power outages on the production lines. Water is another vital resource. To wash the wafers between different stages, millions of gallons of ultra-pure water are needed. Water from which all salts and minerals have been removed so that no residue is left on the circuits. Recycling this water on an industrial scale is one of the most complex parts of factory management in Taiwan. The logistics of spare parts is also a masterpiece, because every hour of production line downtime brings millions of dollars in losses. ASML has large warehouses near TSMC's factories that keep all sensitive parts ready in an isolated environment. Dutch technicians live as residents in Taiwan so that in the event of the slightest error, they can be at the machine's side in less than a few minutes. In the meantime, the role of software systems should not be overlooked. Each EUV machine generates terabytes of data every second. This data is sent to TSMC's supercomputers to identify failure patterns using artificial intelligence algorithms. This system can predict which part might fail in the coming week. Organizational learning at TSMC is a strategic asset. They have an atomic diary, detailed documentation of every error that has occurred in the last 30 years. This means that when a problem arises, they don't have to reinvent the wheel. They have access to the accumulated knowledge of thousands of engineers over decades. This monopoly on production has turned TSMC into a political entity. In today's world, having an advanced fab is equivalent to having nuclear weapons during the Cold War. This company guarantees not only Taiwan's economy, but also its national security. As long as the world needs these chips, Taiwan will remain an inseparable part of the global economy. But this technology has touched the boundaries of physics. At the 2-nanometer scale, a phenomenon called quantum tunneling occurs, in which electrons pass through walls and the circuit goes out of control. Engineers are forced to invent new structures like GAA, stands for gate-all-around, to prevent this strange behavior of atoms. This development process is so expensive that many competitors like global foundries have dropped out of the race. Now only 3 players remain in the world: TSMC, Samsung, and Intel. And among these 3, TSMC stands at the top by a large margin, not just because of the machines, but because of its large-scale operational experience. The EUV supply chain is a perfect symbol of globalization. The laser from America, the mirror from Germany, the chemistry from Japan, the engineering from the Netherlands, and the execution in Taiwan. If any one of these countries decides to cut off its cooperation, the entire machine of digital civilization will come to a halt. This is a mutual dependence that has so far maintained world peace. Morris Chang, the founder of TSMC, always said,
"This company is a foundry for the ideas of others."
But today, this foundry has itself become a center of innovation. Without TSMC's ability to implement complex designs, the ideas of companies like Apple would have remained only on paper. In the end of this act, we must understand that the EUV machine is not just an industrial tool. This machine is the pinnacle of humanity's quest to control matter at the smallest possible level. We are writing history on atoms, and this factory is the printing press of our new age. As we cross the threshold of 2026, the challenges grow larger. The cost of each new generation of chips is growing exponentially, but as long as humanity's appetite for processing power and artificial intelligence exists, the engineers in Netherlands and Taiwan will continue to dance with atoms. even if physics says there is nowhere left to go. If the second act was about the miracle of creation, the third act is about the horror of loss. Today's world is so dependent on advanced chips that a brief interruption in their flow could cause the collapse of social order. The chip is no longer a commercial commodity. The chip is the foundation of power in the 21st century. At the center of this tension is the island of Taiwan, a place that China considers a rebellious province and the United States considers a strategic partner. But beyond politics, this small geography hosts the world's most vital asset. The concentration of 92% of the production capacity for sub-7 nanometer chips on this island has created a single point of failure for all of humanity. Washington had come to terms with this reality for years. But the rise of artificial intelligence and its military applications changed the equation. When autonomous drones and facial recognition systems needed TSMC chips, the White House realized that its military superiority depended on the stability of a 160-kilometer strait that is under the watch of the Chinese military. In October 2022, the Joe Biden administration made a decision that was unprecedented in the history of world trade. They enacted a set of export rules aimed not just at punishing China, but at crippling Beijing's ability to produce advanced chips. This was a surgical strike at the heart of the Made in China 2025 strategy. These rules banned use of any American technology, software, or equipment for making advanced chips in China. But the real blow was the use of a rule called the Foreign Direct Product Rule. The US announced that any company in the world, even in the Netherlands or Korea, that uses American tools is not allowed to provide services to China. Washington went even further and targeted human resources. Hundreds of the most talented engineers and managers in China's chip industry were American citizens or green card holders. The new law forced them either leave their jobs in China or face the risk of passport cancellation and severe penalties in the United States. Overnight, the masterminds behind China's major projects left their offices. China called this move a technological blockade and an attempt to prevent the natural progress of a nation. Beijing immediately injected billions of dollars into the big fund, the National Semiconductor Industry Fund, to create self-sufficiency. But money alone cannot replace 30 years of experience in working with quantum physics. Corruption within China's chip industry also became a barrier. Billions of dollars disappeared, and large projects like HSMC in the city of Wuhan went bankrupt without producing a single chip. This showed how difficult it is to build a copy of TSMC, even for a superpower with unlimited resources. However, in 2023, the introduction of Huawei's Mate 60 Pro with a 7-nanometer chip made in China by SMIC shocked the world. Some considered it a failure of the sanctions, but teardowns revealed that China had achieved this success using older machines at a very high cost and with low yield. It was a victory of pride, not a sustainable economic victory. In the meantime, the concept of the silicon shield in Taiwan was discussed. This idea suggests that because both China and the United States are heavily dependent on TSMC, neither would dare to start a war that would damage these factories. TSMC is, in effect, the guarantor of Taiwan's peace and survival against being swallowed by Beijing. But military analysts warn that this shield is cracking. If China concludes that it can never reach the West's level of technology, it may be tempted to seize the island and make this treasure its own, even if it comes at the cost of a global confrontation. For Beijing, unification with Taiwan is a sacred national goal that transcends economic issues. The T-Day or Day of Attack scenario has been simulated many times in Washington's think tanks. A naval blockade by the Chinese Navy could stop the export of chips, without needing to fire a single shot at the factories. China could bring the world economy to its knees and use this tool for political bargaining. This is where the discussion of the Brookings option or the Scorched Earth Strategy comes up. Some have suggested that the United States should explicitly state that in the event of a Chinese attack, it will bomb TSMC's factories so that this technology does not fall into Beijing's hands. This is a terrifying message. If we can't have it, no one should. The Taiwanese hate this idea. For them, TSMC is not just a factory, it is the fruit of decades of effort and their national identity. They say that even if the factory remains intact, without a connection to the global internet, and the supply chain of spare parts from the Netherlands and the United States, these machines would stop working within a few weeks and turn into metal statues. The CEO of ASML has also confirmed that the EUV machines have a kill switch that can be activated remotely. This means that even if the Chinese army enters the building and presses the buttons, the machines will simply not turn on. Today's technology is so intertwined with software that physical possession of it no longer means ownership of the knowledge. To reduce this dangerous dependency, the United States passed the CHIPS Act with a $52 billion budget. The goal is to encourage TSMC, Samsung, and Intel to build their most advanced factories on American soil. The state of Arizona is now home to the largest construction site in the United States for TSMC's new factory. But transferring TSMC's work culture to American soil was more difficult than imagined. Taiwanese engineers complain about the laziness of American workers and their unwillingness to work night shifts and holidays. In contrast, American engineers criticize the dictatorial management style and grueling working hours of the Taiwanese. This is a clash of civilizations on an industrial scale. The cost of production in the United States is also about 50% higher than in Taiwan. Morris Chang, the 90-year-old founder of TSMC, has repeatedly warned that America's attempt at complete self-sufficiency is a futile and very expensive exercise that will ultimately lead to a terrible increase in the price of chips for the end consumer. On the other side, Japan has also awakened. They, who were the kings of chips in the 80s and lost the market to the US, have now established the company Rapidus with government support. Their goal is to skip the current generations and directly reach 2-nanometer technology by 2027. Japan wants to become the world's safe haven for technology again. Europe, with the EU Chips Act, wants to double its share of the manufacturing market. Germany has given billions of euros in subsidies to Intel and TSMC to build factories on its soil. The world is dividing into manufacturing blocks, an end to the golden era where efficiency took precedence over security. Now everyone is looking for silicon insurance. In response to the sanctions, China has restricted the export of rare metals like gallium and germanium, materials that are essential for manufacturing semiconductors and advanced radars. This eye-for-an-eye war shows how complex the supply chain is and that both sides can inflict serious damage on each other. The subject of artificial intelligence has taken this battle into an existential phase. Whoever reaches artificial general intelligence, or AGI, first can break the competitors' encryption codes, design new weapons, and optimize the economy. And to achieve that, a mountain of NVIDIA chips is needed, all of which are made on that same small island of Taiwan. If China can monopolize the production of older chips or legacy chips, which are used in cars, home appliances, and medical equipment, it could use that as a lever of pressure. We might have advanced iPhones, but if we can't buy simple chips for our cars, our civilization will still be paralyzed. Cybersecurity is another layer of this war. Hacking chip design software EDA, which are predominantly American, is one of China's espionage priorities. If they can steal the design blueprints, they can bypass years of research and development. The battle in cyberspace is as real as the battle in the Taiwan Strait. The future of our civilization is ironically tied to silicon atoms. We live in an era where a small piece of plastic and metal determines whether we can stay warm, eat, or communicate with our loved ones. This dependence has made us simultaneously powerful and incredibly fragile. In one of his last speeches, Morris Chang said,
Globalization is almost dead and free trade is almost dead.
These words, from the man who built his empire on globalization, are deeply shocking. We are entering the era of nationalist technology. Ultimately, the battle for TSMC is a battle for digital truth. Each chip contains billions of transistors that act like the nerve cells of our civilization. Whoever produces these cells is, in fact, the controller of the flow of information and thought in the 21st century. Is there a way out of this impasse? Some have pinned their hopes on alternative technologies like quantum computing or optical chips that might eliminate the need for the current massive factories. But that day is still far off, and until then, silicon is king. Our documentary ends with a picture of the sunset on the shores of Taiwan, where the lights of the TSMC factories never go out. Inside, atoms are dancing, and outside, warships are patrolling. This is the paradox of our world, a fragile piece built on nanometer scale layers. We are in the nanometer age. The power that once lay in the vastness of lands, or the number of soldiers, now lies in the space between atoms. The chip war is not just a trade war, it is a battle for the soul of the future. And as history has shown, wherever power is concentrated, a storm will also form.